there are a few easy steps to follow when you divide decimals. Divisors, which is the number on the outside of our division bracket right here, so this number here is not allowed to have a decimal. So what we have to do is we have to get rid of it. We can get rid of it by making the number larger, by multiplying. So if I take this decimal that's here and I move it back here, so make this number 2/10 and now make it 2, I made it 10 times larger. So I have to come here and have to move the same amount of places in the dividend. So I'm going to move it over 1 here, and then I'm going to move the decimal straight up, and then I will divide like I normally do, keeping everything in my columns, and if I keep everything nice and organized, the decimal comes straight up in my answer. Same thing over here. I shift it 1 place, so I shift it 1 place here, and then if I were to move it up, if I was doing traditional, now I did show partial products here. If that's the case, then we would move the decimal in 1 place and move the decimal in 1 place. Not really encouraging us using partial quotients. Much better to use this method right here with the arrow. If we use estimation to help us with these problems, we could rewrite this as 30 divided by 6, which will give me an answer of about 5, meaning I place my decimal right here. For my next problem, this is more like 6/10. So my number is actually going to get larger, because remember when I divide by a decimal that's smaller than 1, my number actually gets larger. So instead of my number being 5, we're going to have to make it 50. My decimal would go here. 30 divided by 600 makes it even larger, makes my answer about 500, so therefore my decimal would go here. Let's move on. Now that we did a little estimation, okay, and we remember anytime we divide by a number less than 1 or a decimal or a fraction less than 1, my number always gets bigger. Keeping that rule in mind, let's move down here and practice some of these problems. So if I estimate and change these numbers and round them, I think that it would be safe to round them to 4 divided by 1 gives me an answer of about 4. Now, we learned that we do not want a decimal outside the division brackets. It's illegal. So if I have 1 and 2/10 here, and I'm dividing that into 3 and 72/100, I need to move my decimal 1 place to the right to make it 10 times bigger, and 1 place to the right. When I do that, it's easiest to rewrite my problem as 12 divided into my new number 37 and 2/10. Okay. So they want me to rewrite it as a whole number problem. We're not going to do that. We're going to just solve it right as we should. So we are going to make sure that we keep our numbers lined up in our columns. And we are going to make sure that my decimal, which is right here, I move it straight up, and that's where it's going to stay. Can I make groups of 12 from 3? No, so I'm going to just put an X there. Can I make groups of 12 from my target number 37? I can. 3 groups. 3 times 12 is 36. I can go ahead and subtract them, left with 1. And then I always do my check step. 1 is smaller than 12, so I can continue. I'm going to bring the 2 down. It gives me my target number of 12. How many times does 12 go into 12? 1 time, so I bring it straight up, and I subtract. I'm left with 0. Because I'm left with 0, I can come on up here. I had already moved my decimal straight up. My answer is 3 1/10, which is very close to my estimate of 4. How do I check it? Well, I take 3 1/10, and I multiply it times my original divisor, which is 1 2/10, And when I do that, I do in fact get an answer of 3 72/100. For my second problem, we have a number less than 1. So we need to not round that down to 0, but it's actually closest to about a half. So let's go ahead and round it to a half. And then we could just round this to the nearest whole number. So let's take it to 14. When I break things into groups of 2, or divide it into halves, that's actually the same thing as making 2 groups from every whole. So my number gets bigger. My answer is about 28. Let's rewrite my problem. 13 5/10 divided by 45/100. The decimal outside here is illegal, so I need to move 2 places and make it 100 times larger. So I'm going to move it, the decimal 2 places in here. There's nothing in this spot, so I'm going to add a 0. And then I'm going to go ahead and rewrite my problem so that I don't get confused with my decimal. My decimal would be at the end of my whole number. So I'm going to take it straight up right away, so it's taken care of. And then I'm going to make sure that I keep my work nice and organized in my columns. And just so we can see that decimal, there it is. How many groups of 45 can I make from 1? None, right? How about from 13? None as well. How many times can 45 go into 135? It can actually go in 3 times. 3 times 45. If I come down here and do that, I get exactly 135. So I'm going to go ahead and subtract. I'm left with 0. Now I still have a 0 here, so I need to actually go ahead and bring that down. How many times can 45 go into 0? I have to fill something in the space in front of the decimal, so that would be 0. I subtract and left with 0, and there's nothing left here. I have 0, so I'm finished. My answer is 30. How can I check it? Well, I'm going to take my divisor here, 45/100, multiply it by 30 groups, and I should get an answer of 13 5/10. On this next page, I do want to point out a couple problems. If we look at problem number 4, I would need to move my decimal 1 place here to get rid of it. So I have to shift it 1 place over here. When I set up my new problem, it's now how many times does 46 go into 16 1/10? And remember, I'm going to move that decimal straight up. I'm going to keep everything organized in my columns. How many times does 46 go into 1? It doesn't. How about into my target number 16? 46 can't go into 16. Can 46 go into 161? Well, let's see here. If I estimate this as about 50, how many 50s make 161? I'm going to guess 3. So if I come over here to the side, 46 times 3, that's 18. Carry, I get 138. I don't believe I can add another group of 46 to that, so I'm going to go ahead with 3. I'm going to do some borrowing so I can subtract. I'm left with 23, which is smaller than 46. Now, we're going to run into a problem here. I have a remainder or a number left over, and I have a decimal up here, so I can't really write a number with a decimal and a fraction. Here's what I do in this situation. 16 and 1/10 is the same thing as 16 and 10/100, or 100,000, or 1,000 10,000s, right? So I can add zeros to the end of this. This is why those of you that like to do your division like this with partial quotients, that's why I said it doesn't really pay to do it this way. So I can add a 0 to the end, and I've not changed the value of my dividend. How many times does 46 go into 230? Well, let's see here. 46 was about 50. How many groups of 50 can make 23? I don't know, maybe, or 230? Well, maybe 4. So let's try 4. And multiply, I get 184. Let's just try 5 just to be sure. And by golly, look what happens when I try 4. I get exactly 230. So above my 0, I'm going to extend my line out a little bit. I'm going to add not a 0. What am I doing here? I'm going to add a 5. 5 times 46 is 230. I'll subtract, I'm left with 0. My answer, then, is 35 hundredths. Okay, and I could look at this problem. We didn't estimate, but this is close to maybe 2. And this is close to maybe 4 or 5. So 2 divided by 4 or 2 divided by 5. 2 divided by 4 is a half, which is about 5/10. 2 divided by 5 is 4/10, so we aren't too bad, close to my estimates. Okay, so just a friendly reminder, anytime we do division and I have a number left over, I can always add a decimal if necessary, or if not, some zeros to the end to help me.